So welcome everyone. We're starting a little bit late, but we're still going to end on time so that we can break for lunch. So this is our panel called Healing as a Site of Resistance, Culturally Affirming Practices. And we've got 5 amazing panelists that are going to be sharing their stories and their insights on why perhaps traditional ways of healing need to be resisted and how we can dream about other ways of actually meeting people where they're at. So first I want to start by acknowledging that we are having this conversation, and also my name is Dahlia. I'm from WAVA Rape Crisis Center, and so we also work on the stolen ancestral lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And I'm especially thoughtful about this territory acknowledgement because as a rape crisis center in my day-to-day work, we know that the land continues to be stolen, and that when we don't have Indigenous folks able to be sovereign over their land, that continues to lead to sexual harm and sexualized violence of particularly Indigenous women and other folks, but also everybody else that are living on these lands. So when we're talking about healing today and why culturally affirming practices are so incredibly important, those things are intimately connected in my mind. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves as we go, but I wanted to start by saying that the premise of this panel is to acknowledge the idea that healing in our colonial, male-dominated, and white-centric society individualizes and medicalizes healing. And so the folks that are here on our panel today are going to be answering some questions and giving us all, I think, really important things to consider when we're thinking about why that is a problem. So the first question I'm going to pose is, please introduce yourself to the degree that you would like to, and why do you think it's important to resist this particular idea that I've just mentioned about healing? And we're going to go popcorn style because, nobody really wants to go first. So I'll leave it up to whoever feels inspired to speak first.
She's saying that I have the mic. I took it so then she could see it. So my name is Rosa Arteaga, and I'm an immigrant, a settler in this land. So I want to acknowledge that I'm standing on an unceded territory. And as a settler, I'm just trying to walk as softly as I can and to do the best that I can to do less harm and to acknowledge where I stand. I work for Battered Women Support Services. I have been working there for 15 years. I'm the clinical supervisor for Stopping the Violence Program and victim support work. I love my work. We have like around 10,000 women who come to our organization every year. Every month, we provide around 250 appointments, individual counseling appointments. And I just want to acknowledge that we have to start from recognizing that it takes a lot of courage for people to access support. Because sometimes as soon as someone comes and sits in front of us, we start asking questions. Many service providers go through the list, right? But we need to acknowledge that for people who come to see us, they come with a wealth of knowledge. They have come so far, and I need to investigate that. I need to acknowledge what they have done, how they took the courage to be sitting here today in front of me. And then I learn from them, and I just provide a healing space that is safe. And this is so important that sometimes many service providers don't even acknowledge how important is the first day and to provide a healing space where people can feel safe. Thank you.
Matakiwasi. My English name is Jody Jones, and my spirit name is Wianwachi. That's Lakota for dancing woman. And I also want to acknowledge that we are on the unceded ancestral homelands of the Squamish-Tsleil-Waututh and Musqueam nations. And I want to give thanks to the Feminist Deliverer for inviting me here to be a part of this important conversation. I guess, you know, and I was thinking about the questions because they were sent to me earlier, and what kind of hit me and I started really thinking was that Eurocentric and male domination traditionally is not a part of the First Nations ceremonies and way of life. I guess I also want to share that I've been walking the Red Road and going to sun dances and ceremonies for about 29 years now. And where I had started in ceremonies and learning about traditional healing under Melvin Graybear's altar in Montana was that that the ceremonies, you know, when they're run in its, I guess, you know, truest form as given to the people, that everybody in the community and everybody within the camp always had a place, and everybody had a purpose and a position for being there. And I've always, you know, said to myself anyways, you know, that I didn't consider myself a feminist. You know, I considered myself a humanist, because I do believe that, you know, in that same concept, you know, and that where I had learned from was that that when you're following these traditions undiluted and to its truest form as given, you know, from Creator, you know, that you know, that you'll feel that, you know, that healing and that support, you know. I think that when you, and I've seen it over the years, and it's been one of my, I guess, things that I do a lot of work with women in the community, and supporting their own healing, and I see a lot of that male dominance and Eurocentric thinking, you know, being incorporated into the ceremonies and the effects that it has. You know, it's very, you know, it's very like my fight and my struggle and my, you know, wanting to empower women to stand in their own power, you know, and to heal, and to have a safe place to heal, you know, and that it changes the structure of the ceremonies and the thinking, you know, and the effects, you know, and I think, you know, it ends up, the effects, from what I've witnessed, aren't as long lasting as if the ceremonies were run in its truest sense. So I'll pass the mic now.
Skip over you.
Tansanawa kumaganak, Madeline Isnikasun, Sukaskis going to Tehkawin, Sakatawa Kutse Nia. Hello, my friends. My name is Madeline. My traditional name is Strong Earth Woman, and I'm originally from Isle Across, Saskatchewan. And I'm very grateful to be on this territory. I've grown up here and gone through everything on this territory, so I'm very grateful for that. For that question, I think why I see a problem with it from my experience is that when you go into these places of healing, you go in there and get a quick cover-up. You go in and you're seen as a number, or what's your medical number, or, you know, when you come in there, you're not, who are you? What's going on for you? What's underlying? What's actually creating whatever's happening with you? So for me, I can tell my story a little bit. So I went through cancer last year, and it was about 2.5 years I was going through it. And I come from a very traditional way of life as well. My dad carries ceremony, and you are nurtured in a way where it's about your spirit. It's like who you are, what medicines you work with, what medicines are gonna work best with you, how do we take care of you with what's going on with you. And then when I was going into these offices, it was like, okay, we're gonna give you this, we're gonna give you this, we're gonna give you this. We don't actually really know why this manifested into a tumor. We're just going to give you this to try to cover that up. So I started to be in these two worlds. I was in two worlds, and then I was seen as this strong earth woman, Sakaski Squeal, in ceremony, and we're going to take care of you because there's underlying traumas that are leading to this tumor to grow and manifest. And I understood that. But then when I went into the medical system, I was getting phone call after phone call after phone call. You know, we need you to come in for this appointment. We need you to do this. And it was like a pressure, and it created a panic, and it created an anxiety, and it brought up anxieties I never had. So it was also creating issues upon the issue that was happening for me. So then I was in these two worlds of the ceremonial people were, you know, very calm with me, and they're like, it's Maddie, this is what's going on for you. And then here it was creating this panic and this alert, and it was like a constant red light. And then I started panicking, and I'm like, I don't know if I should just do ceremony, if I should be at this doctor's office, because, you know, I was in these two worlds, and they're like, if you don't do this, you're gonna die. Over here, they're like, we're gonna take care of you, you're gonna live, we're gonna deal with it. So I was bouncing, was that like a cue to stop talking? Mic goes dead. So it was these two worlds of this balancing, and then it created more issues. So the issue that I see with that is that they're not listening to you. They are not understanding you and understanding where this manifestation of this growth or whatever health is going on for you, this, and it's not healing. There's no healing that happens in those spaces. It's just a quick cover up, a quick fix. We want to cut you apart. We want to do this to you. You're an experiment. I had 6 surgeons in my first surgery because they had no idea what the tumor was. They said, oh, can we have like 6 doctors in here because we all don't know, so one of them might know. I was like, bring them in, like just go ahead. Like I was just ready to get that out. So it created, and I started to feel like an object, like I was a science experiment, right? That's all that was going on for me. So I started to look at myself that way, and then I started to see the scars, and there's no healing. Nobody tells you and counsels you, gives you that space to say, you're beautiful with your scars. You know, you lost a part of yourself, but I'm going to take care of you this way. It's just like, oh, don't worry, we'll tattoo those scars up for you, and you'll look perfect. You'll have better breasts than you did coming in. That's the kind of things they would say to you. So that is the problem I see, because it doesn't feed your spirit. It takes from your spirit, because they're also taking from your body, but they're not doing that in a ceremonial way. So for me, I guess we're going to answer that question after. So the way that I decided to look at it, even when I went for the surgery, because I had a mastectomy in one of my breasts, and then I had a reduction in the other one, I had to train myself to look at it as a ceremony, as the way we do in Sundance when we do a flesh offering. We give a piece of our flesh to say we are gifting this, we are giving a part of ourselves, you know, to pray for what we're praying for, but also to release any carrying. So I said, the doctors are going to take it as a medical thing. That's fine. I'm going to let them think of it that way. I'm going to go into my surgery and I'm going to look at it as a flesh offering. I'm going to look at it as I'm gifting whatever manifested, the traumas that manifested in that tumor through, like it was that big. I said, I'm going to do this as a flesh offering. I'm going to pray and I'm going to gift that so that I can receive everything I've ever prayed for. And it was love. So that is what I decided to do, and I had to learn to do that on my own through all of the chaos and anxiety and phone calls, and 6 doctors that I was seeing were telling me, Maddie, you have a 40% chance, even after this surgery. So there's no clarity, there's no understanding, they don't see you, and they don't hear you. So that's, back to you.
Hi, my name is Mia Susan Amir. I'm really grateful to be here today as part of this conversation. I'm a queer, Crip, Mad Jew of mixed Ashkenazi and Sephardic ascent. I was born in Israel-occupied Palestine, and I've lived most of my life here on the unceded and occupied territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh people. It's cutting out. Can you repeat the question one more time?
So the question is, why do you think it's important to resist the idea that is currently in our society about healing?
I think, oh, there's a mic switch. Hello? Okay. So within my lineage, I am the descendant not even one generation away of survivors of the Holocaust who came to Canada as refugees and became settlers uninvited in Winnipeg. And that's one side of my family. And I think in terms of the current medicalized approaches to healing, one of the problems is where we decide time begins. And that's grounded in very colonial frameworks of analysis. So when we just look at a person who comes to us who is living with the impacts of long-term intergenerational trauma that come from these large events, that catastrophes that are unimaginable, and we try to deal with an individual as though the issue is theirs, as though the issue is a pathology that comes from their body and their mind alone, we don't actually address the large systemic issues that have produced those contexts of pain, trauma, and the ways in which they then get transmitted. So I have a story for myself that helps me to make sense of why the story of my disability, which I see as a direct translation of the unaddressed traumas that were transmitted through my family because there were no appropriate outlets for community-based healing wherein the people that I am connected to were able to sit with other people and sit in witness and share in the narratives of the stories that haunted them. And so those hauntings became a transmission that followed generation to generation to generation. And unless we are able to situate the political and cultural and social context of those harms that we carry, it's too much for an individual to bear alone, and it's not actually the work of an individual to heal. I don't think that we can heal in isolation. I don't think harm happens in isolation, and it begs the responsibility of us as carriers of trauma. I think we are some of the most genius, brilliant, magical humans. We figure out how to survive and thrive through all kinds of conditions, and to create spaces where we can also dictate the conditions of our healing. But that has to happen in collaboration. It has to happen in community, and it has to happen in a historically grounded context that also addresses whatever is happening now that is replicating or looks like or feels like or sounds like those historical conditions. So I think that's one of the reasons, for me, it's most important. And also, I just want to add that, like, for me, I came to change making because I was carrying all of these things, and I felt this great feeling inside of me from childhood that something was wrong with the world. Something was so wrong. And that wrong came from the home that I grew up in. There was a lot of wrong, and that wrong came from this broader historical context. But if we're, most of us, coming to change making from a position of carrying all of that wrong, and we're not creating spaces collectively to address that, those wrongs show up. That trauma shows up in how we meet and be with each other. And that really undermines, I think, the visionary possibilities of the world we want to make, because we're not addressing the context, honestly, that bring us to our work. And I see, our work as change makers as inextricably linked with the work of healing. They're not different. So, yeah, that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good. Thank you all for being here. And thank you to the panelists and the organizers. I would also like to acknowledge that I and we are here on the lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish people, and to give my thanks to the nations whose lands we're on here today. My name is Harsha, and I organize in this city. I work and organize across the street at the Downtown Eastside Women's Center. I also work with undocumented and refugee communities. And in thinking about the problems with this dominant model of healing, I guess to start off with, I'm thinking right in the immediate of this week is, it's a huge week, of course, with the National Inquiry and the National Inquiry's report. For myself personally, in terms of my family's history, this week also marks the 35th anniversary of the Sikh genocide by the Indian state. And so I carry both of those in different ways, of course, but both of those realities. And in thinking about the possibilities of healing, for example, amongst women in this neighborhood, how I just imagine the immense hope, and I know the immense hope, for example, that women held in the National Inquiry report coming down, right? And then to have mainstream Canadian media, to have right-wing racist commentators refute that this is genocide, makes it impossible to think through what healing even means if people cannot even name the realities of what produces the necessity for healing to happen, right? So I'm thinking about that and thinking through healing, because in order for healing to happen, people need to be able to name what the issues are that require healing to take place. So if we as Canada can't name genocide against Indigenous women, Indigenous girls, Indigenous people, Indigenous trans people, Indigenous two-spirit people, then the possibility of healing is not possible, because we can't name the truth that is required for healing to happen. So to echo what people are saying, the current model of healing is based in pathologizing victimhood. It's based on people needing to heal themselves. And of course, we all need to find ways to adapt to injustice, right? We need to find ways to not have the system break us. But deep healing comes from the fact that the thing that needs to be transformed is not the individual. It's the systems that are forcing people to break. We're not broken people. These systems are intended to break us. And so for me, that's the fundamental problem with the dominant model of healing, is that the assumption that we need to fix ourselves. And that leads to all kinds of scripts that we then tell ourselves, right? What's wrong with me? Why am I broken? How can I how can I be a better person in this? How can I adjust to a fundamentally fucked up world? So I'd say that's one of the core issues. I'd say the other piece that is connected to pathologizing the individual is that it focuses then on the individual. So we start to see the need for ourselves to heal versus how can we come together? How can we come together in collective struggle to transform the conditions that are breaking us? So I also think healing is often a very individualistic model, which again isn't to negate that we as individuals need to do what we need to do to take care of ourselves, but we can't do it at the expense of collective struggle and collective transformation of social, political, and economic conditions. I'm thinking about, I recently read this interview with a psychiatrist in Palestine, and she was saying one of the things that she thinks is the worst things to happen in the context of how people are talking about Palestine for her in the medical profession is the importation of the language of PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. And she talks about how, as Palestinians, there is no post-trauma. The state of occupation is an ongoing trauma, and she's being told that in order to get funding, she has to do PTSD-type training, right? PTSD-type healing structures, and use the model of PTSD to work with young people and youth that she works with as a psychiatrist in Palestine. And she says for her, it's infuriating because there is no PTSD when the trauma is ongoing. And so, that is, again, the individualistic idea that the trauma is in the past, that it's something that you can heal from, that it's something that you as an individual have to do, and while the systems that are around you continue, right? They're ongoing. So I think that's a second issue. I think the third one at a basic material level is the lack of access. The way that healing is increasingly structured is incredibly capitalist, right? We have a medical system, which is a deeply flawed Western medical system that leaves out many traditional ways of healing, that casts many different ways of thinking about healing as not part of how we think about healing, right? We don't actually have ways to access a lot of forms of healing. So I also think at a material level, the ability to get the daily needs that we have for healing are increasingly privatized and are not things that we can access in our day-to-day lives. So I think those are some of the key kind of barriers to thinking about this dominant model. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes. I'm so glad that we've named some of those things, because as somebody who's worked in healing around sexualized violence for the past 16 years, I think we've really struggled with things like government contracts that have told us how we have to provide healing, and it often creates the inability to actually do the things that are important for people to feel like when they're accessing healing, that they are fully seen and that those life-affirming opportunities are there for really important pieces to be doing collectively and individually, as you mentioned, Harsha. Okay, I'm cognizant of the time, so I'm going to pose one more question that I think I would love to leave everyone with, and that is perhaps some of the stories of resistance and resilience that we know, as Mia mentioned, that we are incredibly brave and courageous and creative and magical as we survive our trauma, and that it might not always look the way dominant society wants it to look, but that doesn't mean that it's not real and it's not saving our lives every day. So the question that I will pose is, what are some of the ways that you or the community that you work with resist these ideas and survive these ideas every day?
So I just want to say that for some of us who work as counselors, therapists, social workers, support workers, if we are not doing our work thinking that our work is a political act, then we are not doing our work. Because are we here to just provide social services, or we are here to provide social change, right? We don't want just to maintain people alive, so then the 1% who is in the power continue taking advantage of all of us who are at the bottom. We want people to rise up. We want people, as you say, to live as all of us. We are human beings that deserve access to everything, right? And when I think of a story, what is medicalized and stigmatized is the ways in which I speak about women, because women are the ones who access our services. And everything they do to survive gets stigmatized, right? And in the Western language, we talk about coping mechanisms. And we talk about strategies to survive. So all the behaviors that are labeled as wrong or as sick, from my perspective, are brilliant, right? And when I think of, like, I had a woman who came and told me, yeah, because I am bipolar. And I said, do you know the meaning? Do you know what does that mean? And she said, well, sometimes I'm happy and sometimes I'm sad. I said, well, then I guess we all are, right? So I always question who benefits, right, from selling all this medication, from all these labels. And we know that in the Western, all the books that have been written about women's psychology, about our bodies, about our sexuality, were written by white men, right? So I just think that every single woman who comes to our services, everybody who is here, everybody who is in the panel, we are resisting by challenging this, right? And the women who access our services have done it in many ways, even with those coping strategies that are labeled as bad, as wrong, and are stigmatized.
A lot of what I bring is the work that I do within the ceremonies, and when I think about this question, what I think of is honoring those that have gone before me. And because, I think about when I go into ceremony and I sit in a sweat lodge or I'm in Sundance, I think about all of my ancestors and what they have gone through. So I'm able to sit in that lodge or able to sit in that ceremony, and those that have taught me and guided me over the years, and honoring their teachings. And I was, I was taught, things like, the 7 values, that we live our life by, and I wasn't just taught them, I witnessed them from those that were teaching me as well. And so for me to carry myself in my life and in the ceremonies and in my work, it's like, because for me it's all one and the same, because I carry myself wherever I go. And so because I know where I had come from, and I know the effects that, like, genocide has had on my life too, and I didn't grow up not even know what a smudge was. I grew up in Vancouver here, and my mother was in residential school for 13 years, and so and so I know what I felt like, and where I came, and the emptiness. And then when I began to learn about these ceremonies, and I was ever so grateful, and I understood that that this way of life was my right. It was my right. These are my ceremonies, and so, and that, and I began to wonder, if this is how all of this, because I didn't know about the Potlatch Band and the Sundance Band, and I knew about residential school because my mom went there, but all of these other things I had no idea, and when I began to learn about them, I began to wonder, was this why I felt so empty? And then I began to wonder, I wonder how it affected other people, and that's where it began to grow for me to learn. And so when those teachings came, I was, and I'm still, I'm ever so grateful for those teachers. And so to, because it's how Creator gave it to us, but also I can't stress enough how much, for myself anyways, it's, resisting, those, colonial and patriarchal and male-dominated, ways, that I still help to, I guess, a fight against, is, on how I carry my life, on how I live my life and how I interact with those, that come my way. Thank you.
A couple of years ago, I had the honor to be part of a small group of people who coordinated something called the Creative Coping and Grieving Arts Practice Space at the Allied Media Conference, which is an annual political media conference that happens in Detroit, Michigan. And that space was created for us to democratize the work of healing our communities. So rejecting this idea that healing comes from an externally imposed or externally offered system, and that truly the values and tools that we need in order to heal come from within our communities. So we created space for folks to bring their stories, their offerings, and to share in those offerings in order to transmit and increase the possibility within our respective communities to do that work on our own terms in self-determined ways. And that was really grounded in the idea of healing justice and addressing the systemic barriers that exist to accessing care and support in the ways in which our various communities need and deserve, and created a space for, I think, creativity that could never flourish inside of those systemic approaches. So that is a story that kind of really fills me up with hope around what we can create. And I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I think there's so much going on in my mind. There's so much that we're doing. Like, just being in this room right now is what we're doing to resist that. Standing here together, listening and sharing and energy sharing, spiritual sharing, whatever it is we're doing, it's all happening in this space. And I'm very honored that you invited me to be here today, because sometimes you get in your head, because of the world we live in, that's like, what do I have to offer? What do I have to say? What really did I go through? But the way you word it, I couldn't word it that way. It really gets you thinking. But I think mostly what comes to my mind in the way that we resist this, or the way that we show that we are doing this, and that how our communities are doing this together, is we are, in my language, we are Esquiwak. And it's not you are a woman, it's you are fire. You are the flame. You are what gives life and what can take life. So, and it's really interesting that my dad, the male in our family, is the one who is teaching me these ways of being this fire, of being this flame, of being this way that I'm walking. Is that my dad is doing this. My dad he goes into ceremony as the Sundance chief, but he doesn't stand there and say, I am this man, I am the chief, I am standing here in front of you and telling you what to do. He says, no, I am standing here working for Esquiwak. I am just the doer. That's what I'm doing here. So when my dad does that, he is doing that work within the family that's full of Esquiwak, that's full of these flames, and we're all teaching each other. So I think that's what comes to me, is that every day we're doing that by waking up and standing up and dressing ourselves and getting ready to face the world, the system that we live in, but still standing strong. Even if we have pains. I walked in here and I was like, oh man, how am I going to do this today? I don't feel well. But I knew there was a purpose and there's a reason, because these systems teach us, if you have anxiety or you have these fears, to just listen to them and go to the back. But no, I'm going to face that today, and I'm going to deal with that, and I'm going to come here, and I'm not going to let that get the best of me. And that is the fire within all of us, the fire within all of us. The men have it too. And didn't forget about that part of us as well, because I remember there's that balance. Like, we have to have that balance because we all protect each other and we all take care of each other in certain instances. Like when they're at the drum, the women are the Iskuawak are the one who stand on the outside to protect while they are singing those songs. It's not saying that the women can't drum. That's the reason why they do that, because that women have that direct connection. And you were talking about time. Someone was talking about time. My dad shares this thing that we all live in a 1260 timing frequency right now. We live in the 12 months and the 60 seconds and the 60 minutes. And that is the society we live in. But really, what we need to live in is 1320. 1320 timing frequency teaches us to live with the 13 moons, because that's how many times we have a year, right? Not 12. Someone decided to fit 2 moons in 1 month. I don't know who that was. But it's the 1320 timing frequency, and then the Mayan calendar, and it's that 0.20 decimal. And that's how we live. We live with the sun, the moon, the elements, and the earth. So I think that is how we get back to that. That's how we resist that, by living in that. Because we all live 9 to 5 in that 1260 timing frequency. And that all has to do with that life fire. Because the sun, right? The sun is what wakes us up. The sun is what tells us that how do you know when your food comes up? When does your food grow? What time of year? So once we get back to that is when we're going to live in that true balance. Hi.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my gosh, stories. There's so many. I think in terms of, thinking about powerful stories of healing, I think for me it goes back to some just core ideas, right? So one is the really basic principle that healing is not in isolation, and that also healing has to be reciprocal. Right, I think one of the other issues of around, just to go back to a second, around the current dominant model is the idea of, that someone can heal you, that someone can somehow do this to you, and also that someone is the giver and you are the receiver, right? It's an inherently charity, unreciprocal, kind of hierarchical model. And so for me, true healing is flipping that, so, that we do it collectively, also that we do it reciprocally, that we're all capable of healing and we're all able to receive healing as well and to be healed through each other. And also that healing is, what allows us to be the best versions of ourselves that we want to be, right? What allows us to live with the intention that we want to live with. And, in this neighborhood, I think the most powerful, most meaningful expression of healing is the February 14th Women's Memorial March that happens every single year. It is a collective expression of love and a collective expression for healing, for, to collectively grieve, to collectively remember, to collectively honor, to heal as much as possible with constant loss that's always compounding. And to me, I think in this neighborhood and really in this city and across these lands, the February 14th Women's Memorial March that started in this neighborhood in 1992 is one of the most profound expressions of healing that we can learn from, in what it means and everything that reverberates through it. And also I think there's many other instances, in a context where, we're in a city with a housing crisis. We're in a city where a homeless person's average life expectancy is 40 to 49 years old. It is almost half, right? You cannot have healing if your life expectancy is radically cut short. And also then where every solution to homelessness is more institutionalization, right? In that context, I think tent cities are incredible models of healing, of people self-determining, coming together to provide housing, to provide care, to think about how to live together in the day-to-day, to provide food, to provide shelter, provide harm reduction, provide services. I think tent cities are a deeply healing, which isn't to say there's not issues, not to romanticize any of these, but that it's an incredibly transformative way of thinking about how to live. I also think for undocumented women who, live outside of the state structure almost completely by necessity because you're undocumented, There are, the birthing networks that exist amongst undocumented women, the freedom schools that exist across these lands. These are all incredibly vibrant language revitalization, all of the ways in which people are coming together to assert life, to be able to live in a self-determined way, in a collectively self-determined way, are all examples of healing. Yeah, thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you all so much. Yes, let's do that. So we've got about 3 minutes on the 1260 time version. I wish we could keep talking about this all day. I just want to say that I am profoundly grateful that everybody accepted to be part of this dreamy panel that I threw together and proposed, and that I'm very grateful that our programming committee accepted. And that for me, just know that this is in my heart and that this will live with me going back to WAVA, and in our work we will continue to have these conversations, and I think that that's really important. For anyone here that is feeling like they need to check in with somebody, there's folks with Feminists Deliver t-shirts, and there's also elders here to meet with you if you feel like that would be useful in your journey today. So maybe what I'll do is I'll open it up to the floor for the last couple of minutes. If there are questions or comments, you can put your hand up and I can come to you.
I just want to address the lady here. Can you hear me? Regarding the, I had breast cancer myself, and I feel like I was just butchered. It was just, I was so traumatized by it, and given my age and everything, I thought, oh well, it's not just I'm lucky I got through this. I don't have cancer anymore, but just the way I was treated. And I went to the BRA Day, Breast Reconstructive Awareness, and I seen how the Caucasian women, the other people were, they look like models. And meanwhile, it looked like you took a machete and chopped me. It's just deplorable. And this was like years back, but at least 6 years ago, and I still haven't got the proper reconstructive surgery. Back burner. This is, you have to settle for this. And they had did something that I didn't agree with. Well, I was under the knife, so to speak, and I feel that that's par for the course. It's so, and holistic healing. Like I go to acupuncture, I spend a lot of money for myself, and I think where I could pay for the extra medical, but I don't know how to go about it. Where you're allowed, where it's concluded in your medical. Because I'm just on disability. And I feel that that's sad when I believe in acupuncture and whatnot, and the native, our herbs and stuff like that. That's, and I so appreciate everything that was shared. Thank you.
No, thank you for sharing that, because it's the same experience I had now. I don't know how long ago that was, but it was the same thing. I have scars, and they don't make me feel good, but they're like, oh, it's so beautiful, that perspective or whatever they're trying to share with you. But I chose that route too, right? I made that choice too because of fear as well. Like, I feel like I got pushed and pressured into it, but I made that decision. And for me now, it's like, okay, what am I going to do? What is my family going to do? What is my community came together? That was, I think out of this, I did a fundraiser on December 5th, to help me to get through with all the payments and the natural ways of healing that I was doing. And my community came, and that was the greatest gift I think I came from these scars, like whatever it is, they're your warrior wounds or whatever you want to call them, like whatever people want to say about them, you know. I always think of the people that came together for me for that. You know, it was my community showing love. It was the love that was received, and that was the greatest thing, because that's what I prayed for my whole life. So there was a bigger picture context for me coming out of that, was that love. And I'm sure you received that with that smile. I'm sure you receive all that love, you know, from the community. So thank you for sharing that.
Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question or have a comment?
Well, more than one person has said it, and all around we hear it, and it's certainly true that we are here to support each other. And my mind goes to, can people hear me? Yes. My mind goes to quite another thing at the same time, that someone recently who's not young said to me, I wonder if things are ever going to change, because she realizes she's not going to live forever. So I said, yes, well, in a way they do change, but we have better things than we had, and we have worse things than we had. And the worst, one of the worst things that we have keeps happening all the time. So anyway, coming from that topic, because I could elaborate on that for 15 hours, I'm going to the other one, that we are here to support each other. And it even, you know, even in religion, there's a hymn that says, help us to love each other, if not as they are now, as they may become. So always, always support even the people that are not close to our heart, support them. And I was thinking then of a funny one about that support. Now, you can fool people sometimes, not always. And what happened was, a man who's born in Vancouver, but he lives and works in London, England, and he works in the theatre world. He was in town for only 2 weeks around Christmas, and he phoned what he considers his friends. I thought I was an acquaintance, but I guess I'm one of his friends. And he said, I don't have time to see all my friends. I'm only here for 2 weeks, but let's do a play. And we did Macbeth. It was not that traditional. For example, the three witches were done by 2 women and 1 man. And to my memory, there are always 3 women. And the other one is, the ethnicities were a little mixed too, you know, of the witches. But one witch said to me, just before we went on, she said, oh, I'm nervous. And I said, well, you're supposed to be nervous. And she said, oh, she said, but I was brought up in Hong Kong, and we didn't study Shakespeare, so I made a joke of it. I said, really? A British colony, and they didn't study Shakespeare? And then I said, well, you know what? I don't care if you studied Shakespeare or not. And nobody in the audience cares if you studied Shakespeare or not. All they care, you're perfect for the part, and you do a good job. So it seemed to help her. I hope it helped her a little bit, because she seemed to do a good performance anyway. But the man noticed something. It was separate. He didn't hear us, but he noticed something about me. And he said, because I was not feeling well, and he said, are you sure you can go on? And I said, of course I can. And then, although, you know, I was thinking, everybody else is so brilliant, And I'm not doing very well because I'm feeling shaky, like I'm going to faint. And guess what? Somebody must have picked up something about me somewhere, because she came from the audience. She was in the front row. And she said, "Oh, I want to talk quietly. I don't want everybody else to hear." She said, "You were the best in the play." And I was sitting thinking, when's that woman going to come on again? So you see, you can't always do it in real life. But when you're on the stage, you can fool the people.
Okay, so I believe, thank you everyone. Thank you everyone on the panel. Can we get a round of applause for the amazing panelists? And thank you to all of you for coming to be part of community, to have these really important conversations and to listen. And I'm sure that folks will hang out for a little bit. If you have comments or questions or you want to connect, please feel free. And I believe that lunch is going to be served fairly soon. Okay, so we might just be waiting for us to finish. Thank you all.